first official log, stardate 47634.44. The USS Music Arcade is bound to rendezvous for a joint concert with some flute saxophone duo from Starfleet. Spirits are high on board, although Chief of Security Edie is in sick bay. His encounter with dangerous wildlife on Moropa 2 went well, only for his return to have been knocked out by a cat. As for Chief and Audio Engineer Firestone, his attempt to clear the warp core's cabling has been met with disputable success.
Help! I'm trapped in cables!
Despite all these small impediments, the ship goes on to explore the sounds of space.
Welcome to Music Arcade. Hello everyone, welcome to this very tired space theme episode of Music Arcade. We're all going through a bit of upheaval. Well, maybe not all of us, I think Rana's fine. But
yeah.
2/3 of us are going through some pretty serious upheaval in our lives right now, so I'm personally going to apologize. I'm Galen, the sound guy Firestone. I'm going to personally apologize for not being as animated as usual. I am having just a terrible week, so I'm a little exhausted.
And how are you doing, Eddie?
Well, 2021 hasn't finished proving that it can be a worse year than 2020 for me, so hi.
Now, before we go into the episode proper, I would like to take a moment for a little something related to a couple of former episodes.
Okay.
So, in the last episode, I think the one before that, I think we've established that I am never wrong and that I will never have to retract any statement from past mention. Because I'm just that good.
You did say that, yes.
I certainly did. Now, let's move back to episode 10, the Yoshitaka Hirota special, in which I talked about Battle of the Venus 7. Now, the problem here is that I was looking at a playlist that didn't credit the specific composers for the individual tracks, and a separate website which did credit the author for specific tracks. The problem was that they were numbered differently, meaning that the track I was talking about, Battle of the Venus 7, was actually by Manabu Namiki, and not Yoshitaka Hirota, which wrote Battle of the Eight Grimoire instead. So this is a complete misattribution, and explain why this sounded kind of different from his usual style.
That explains a lot, actually. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, so that mistake was my bad, and I wanted to clarify that. Also, Battle of the Eight Grimoire is very good and very Yoshitaka Hirota. Now that that's been clarified, again, my apologies. And this only confirms that my complete boisterous overconfidence was an excellent setup for karma to hit.
Yeah, no, I called that out immediately at the time, I think, too.
I called that as well.
I think the three of us just crossed our arms and we're just waiting for this to bite up.
And turns out, by that point, it already had been the case for 5 episodes.
Nice.
Timely.
Now, on that, let's get to the episode proper, maybe with what brought up this episode to be, and this theme to be the one we're going to explore today.
Well, weirdly, I seem to recall that one of the reasons was that Eddie wanted to talk about the Metroid soundtrack, and yet that is not on our playlist at all today.
We ended up going a different route. We'll talk about Metroid again in the future, but...
Especially since Metroid Dread is coming out soon, I can't wait! Okay, sorry.
Very much.
God, I wish I had a Switch.
I kind of agree with this absence, however, since one of the distinctions I pedantically made the moment this episode discussion came up was that a space game and a game that happens on an alien planet are not the same atmosphere-wide.
And which one of you added Risk of Rain?
That was certainly me.
Yep, okay.
And that is the absolute worst fit. Good.
Just checking.
Let's talk about Halo 2.
Let's talk about Halo 2.
Good lord.
Okay, so this actually comes from another one of my subscriber specials. I've talked about this a few times, but to recap, I have this thing where if you spend a certain number of channel points in my channel, you could make me play a video game. And one of my regulars, Spacebird, has been making me go through the Halo series in chronological order. So I started with Reach, did Halo 1, and then I did Halo 2. And Halo 3 is on the docket. I'm not sure when I'm going to get to it. It'll be sometime this month. But one thing I noticed was that the Halo 2 soundtrack was absolutely jamming. Now, I don't really do Western soundtracks that much. I tend to find them too atmospheric. I tend to prefer strong melody lines. But if there's one thing Martin O'Donnell does, it's really good, strong melody lines. So that had me right out of the gate.
Oh, as far as strong things go, that is strong.
Yeah. But before I talk about the individual songs, I want to talk about something I discovered when I actually got my hands on the physical CD. My mind was blown. So this soundtrack came out in 2005, ? Around there? I want to say. So I got the CD, and I'm looking through the production notes, as I always do, and I'm seeing some interesting stuff. For one thing, it's a combination of composed tracks and licensed tracks, and there's songs by, like, hard rock greats, or at least for the time, hard rock greats, Breaking Benjamin and Incubus. Incubus being one of the biggest bands in the world at that point in time. And then there's a song by Hoobastank, because why not? Can you be more mid-2000s than Hoobastank, really?
Oh, Christ.
EVA. EVA.
I just want to point out that I, for better or worse, did not know Hoobastank by name until recently, but I did know one of their songs, and I hate the band name now that I know it.
I learned of them, as I hinted at, from a DS rhythm game called Elite Beat Agents.
I knew about them because I listened to a lot of alternative rock in the early 2000s. I was just starting to get into metal, but that didn't mean my older music taste went away, and even now I still think about a lot of the stronger bands from that era. I miss REM. Does anyone else miss REM? I liked REM. Anyway, so I'm being told by my Twitch chat that 2004 is when Volume 1 of this soundtrack came out, and that's the volume that I have. I need to find Volume 2. Thank you.
Space Bird!
You are a suitable bird for this episode. Congratulations.
And the one who recommended Halo to begin with, so it's all coming full circle.
Ha! Halo full circle, I get it.
Oh, damn it.
Perfect.
Anyway, back to what I was saying. So, and yes, Hoobastank has a terrible name. So I was looking through production notes, and I got just flabbergasted by a specific name on there, and that is Nile Rodgers. Nile Rodgers is not really someone video game people would know, but music people absolutely know this name. I just stopped what I was doing when I saw his name on there. One, he does have a track on here, obviously. But two, he co-produced the album. Who is Nile Rodgers, you ask? Well, think of just
Who is Nile Rodgers?
Nile Rodgers is basically the top pop music producer in the 70s. He basically made the disco sound. It wasn't Steve Greenberg, the one who did Funky Town. That was like borderline pre-disco. This was the guy.
That was more of a... I'm thinking it's more funk than disco, but that's clearly on the transition point.
Yeah, it's right there. But man, Nile Rodgers has been kind of like one of the big time pop producers for basically 40 years. He's still going to this day. His last big hit was guitars on Get Lucky by Daft Punk and Pharrell Williams. That's a song.
Indie band Daft Punk.
Yeah. So this guy is like a humongous name in music. Like, this is one of these guys like Trevor Horn or Quincy Jones. Like, they're just sort of everywhere. So to see his name on a video game soundtrack as a producer was really kind of incredible. Because I don't think this was him, quote-unquote, slumming it. As I said, they had Incubus, one of the biggest bands in the world, on this soundtrack for several songs. And Breaking Benjamin is not exactly a cheap ticket back in those days either.
It's a name I know.
Yeah, exactly. So clearly Microsoft threw approximately all of the dollars at the Halo 2 soundtrack. They are like, we are going to make this the most moneyed video game soundtrack in history. The fact that original tracks show up on here by these artists is really kind of incredible.
The game designers probably went, okay, how much money are we getting for this? Everything.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, pretty much. Now, I gotta be honest, if any game deserves this much praise and money, I would make a serious argument that Halo 2 does, because, man, this is a good video game. I don't think that's surprising anybody. It's a very good video game.
Wow, hot take there.
Yeah, real hot take. I don't play shooters. I don't even like shooters, and I love this game. I'm super happy I played it.
I skipped this era of shooters mostly because I was still mad this wasn't another Unreal Tournament.
Okay, fair enough.
But now I recognize that these are indeed very good games with shockingly good soundtracks.
Yeah, the soundtracks have really been going. And even outside of the Nile Rodgers thing, which just blew my mind, the regular game soundtracks by then Bungie regular Martin O'Donnell are just really good. They're just really good. I mean, obviously you got the main theme in here, the Mjolnir mix. You know that guitar line. I don't even need to hum it. Rana probably will, because that's what he does.
Da 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 da. Da, 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 da.
And there it is.
Da, da, da.
We need to work on that album.
Da, 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 da.
We'll make it like a subscriber goal or a Patreon goal or something. I will totally produce that.
I'm game.
Okay, we need to actually have a conversation about that then, I think. Maybe actually be time. Yeah, and that is just such an iconic theme. And yet it's also, like, distinctly American. Which I think is kind of... It's very different than the normal, like, heavily themed Japanese songs that I tend to do. Even the more rock-oriented ones, like Shin Megami Tensei or FF14... It just feels very chunky, very hard rock, very alternative in a way that those really don't.
A thought crossed my mind while rehearing this mix specifically, which is that somewhat... I mean, first of all, I mostly knew the Halo theme from the first game, which has the same bass through line, plus my ability to hum it, but... The main thing is that the guitar that's going isn't everywhere. And that guitar, I mean, it just feels that someone chose to disregard any setting but the maximum on every possible setting that guitar has, because it just either isn't playing or is going full ham as much as possible. No in between.
I mean, according to a source I found, Steve Vai played on the Halo 2 version of the main theme. So going full ham is Steve Vai's main mode. So,
well, looking at the liner notes, I have the booklet in my hand right now. Guitars performed by Steve Vai. produced by Martin O'Donnell, Michael Salvatori, and Nile Rodgers.
Yeah, no,
Never
the
heard of those guys.
soundtrack?
yeah, like there's a reason me among the 3 people in this podcast, I went, maybe this could use with a little bit more chill.
The insanity
that's
of
fair.
Steve Vai and Nile Rodgers working together. That blows my mind. These are 2 sections of music that never should have intersected, and they did on this kind of glorious over-the-top rock song. And I love that. That is a collaboration that probably had no business existing, and I'm so glad it does.
A rock song built on what is originally a very solemn space theme, no less.
I mean, at this rate, they will release, Halo 6 with Paul McCartney on it?
You say that like that's a bad thing.
I'm just saying it's an escalating thing. I don't think they got such big names for the other games. I might be wrong, but good lord.
I mean, again, Incubus was one of the biggest bands in the world back in 2004, 2005, so...
Yes, it was.
So the fact that they got them for multiple songs on the Halo 2 soundtrack says an awful lot about big names. They're totally willing to throw whatever money they want at it. But then again, this was back in the Bungie era. Things have changed since 343 took over.
Yeah, and this was basically Microsoft throwing as much money as they could to fate out the PS2.
And making it work probably a lot better than expected. I really have nothing negative to say about the soundtrack. But, the main theme is ridiculously freaking awesome. But the stage themes are also really good. One of the stage themes I wanted to take a look at was called Reclaimer, which is actually a remix of an earlier stage, Unyielding. Same kind of cool melodic through line there. I don't really have much to say on it other than just, if it gets me bouncing in my chair as I'm shooting enemies in a first-person shooter game, someone's doing something right.
Yeah, or rolling across a large-scale battlefield on your weirdly wobbly vehicle. It manages to keep up with the action.
Yeah, it does.
And that's something not a lot of shooters do, actually.
Yeah, either they go completely over the top. Nothing against Mick Gordon, but let's just be honest here. Mick's soundtracks don't tend to follow the action so much as the action follows the music.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
Not a bad thing. This is not me complaining. Or something that where the music is completely unnecessary and you don't even notice it, like just about every modern military shooter. This is not the case. This actually really did enhance the experience in ways that Western games and shooters in particular don't tend to do for me.
Yeah, I'm almost tempted to say that this soundtrack was composed with almost Eastern sensibilities. Not in the songs themselves, but in the usage of the soundtrack.
Yeah, I could agree with that. Again, a lot of Western games are just so atmospheric. It doesn't really give me anything to hum, doesn't really give me anything to jam to, doesn't really give me anything to sink into the scene. I am told that Horizon Zero Dawn has an incredible soundtrack, and yet I can't remember hearing a song in that soundtrack, never mind actually playing it. I seem to recall that game being mostly silent, which might actually not be accurate. That might be my memory misremembering this, but that should say a lot, that that's my impression of that game's music, that it does not exist.
And then again, soundtracks in vast open world game is a whole haystack.
It is, and there's a lot to be said, but
that's not this episode's topic.
nope, not it is. Yeah, I guess Halo 2 is going to be the shooter that kind of breaks the rules. Usually my own personal tastes are, unless I'm shooting Nazis, I'm not really interested in playing shooters. But every experience I've had with Halo has been a positive one, and honestly, the soundtracks have gone into that in no small way.
Yeah, like I said, I didn't play the game besides the multiplayer component a long time ago, but I just checked in on your stream and was like, huh, this is a really good music for an action scene.
Really is. And that's very consistent. I can't recall a single bad song, and I kind of remember nothing but good ones.
Not only is it consistent, but it has a unity and an identity.
Yeah.
You hear a Halo track, it sounds like a Halo track.
Yeah. Which is something that Western composers, by and large, don't really get right.
I think the soundtrack also crossed barriers a lot, because I never got to play any of the Halo games. Like, Halo 1, I think, was a Windows Vista exclusive, and my PC couldn't run it, and I had a PS2, not an Xbox. But, like, when the theme plays, I recognize it, no matter what. And I never touched the thing.
And I may as well bring this up. I talk about going to video game concerts a lot. My very first video game concert was Video Games Live, and they actually played the trailer music to Halo 3, and actually had Jen Taylor on stage to deliver one line for no good reason. I thought that whole thing was kind of hilarious, but also, like, that's the same concert I also heard One Winged Angel live for the first time, and I hold them kind of in equal regard, which really kind of says something, again.
Yep.
On a short tangent about Video Games Live, one thing that I love about them is that they came to Brazil a couple times, and they learned eventually that there's a Super Nintendo racing game called Top Gear that is very famous here, and people love the title theme. So they made an entire arrangement for piano solo of that title theme just to play in Brazil.
Oh, that's
awesome. Because they realized the audience loved it.
That's a very sweet way to adapt to the audience.
I love that.
For the record, nothing to do with the TV show, but look up Top Gear, the video game. The title theme is great, and maybe we will touch on it in a future episode, who knows.
Yeah.
I could certainly see a racing game episode at some point.
I would have almost nothing to add to that. Oh dear. But yeah, Halo 2, kind of a masterpiece in all ways, especially in including its soundtrack.
Boy, I wonder what Bungie is up these days musically.
Not quite the same. I gotta be honest, I totally see Destiny here, but I have not had any interest whatsoever in Destiny. It looks really just not my thing.
Okay, first, show of hand, who in this podcast has played Destiny 2? Because not me.
Nope.
I have quite a bit.
Okay. Well, you have my compassion.
Compassion? It's a nice game.
Yeah, no, but big online games can be long investments.
Yeah, I mostly played it solo, to be honest. But anyway, yes, we're talking about Destiny now. And to any Destiny fans who are listening to this, they realize that A, we are talking about this franchise, and B, this is a music podcast. You know what's coming up, it's Journey. It's the one track that everyone talks about. And to be honest, everyone says the soundtrack to Destiny 2 is amazing. I don't really feel it for most of it. I don't remember a single track except for Journey. And Journey kinda lands to me every single emotion you tend to feel in these space opera-ish settings.
Which makes sense, given that having listened to the track, it sounds like 6 or 7 tracks put end to end.
Yeah,
like, it goes places.
Yeah, I haven't played the first Destiny, and from what I understand, Journey came from the first game and was rearranged for the sequel. I only played the sequel game, and only after a few expansions too. So I mostly know this song as what plays in the background while you are waiting in orbit to do whatever activity you want to do. Like you have a menu of places to go and activities to enter, and in the meantime you see your spaceship just floating in orbit on some planet or some moon, and it has that very serene feeling, very serene vibe at the start to fit the very serene spacey atmosphere you have with those visuals. But as the piece goes on, I have to imagine they took bits that were other tracks in the original game and added to it, because it does change the mood a lot as the song goes along, and I find it's a great theme to use in those sort of waiting room areas, because you are waiting for one of those experiences and you're hearing basically what exactly every single sort of thing you can do in the game feels like, from the most peaceful to the most glorious we are defeating the enemy moments.
Yeah, like it's called Journey for a reason. You just go through an entire game's worth of music in like 7 minutes.
Not wrong, and should be noted that 7 minutes for a single track in a video game soundtrack tends to be a bit on the long side.
Yeah, that's a
But
very
not
long
surprising.
track.
But if it's in a waiting lobby, long tracks tend to be a pretty good choice, because lobbies can take a while.
And you can often just leave the game running while you're in a peaceful area such as a lobby and go do some other stuff, and you like the music in the background to vary.
Solid.
And yes, I'm speaking from personal experience. I leave games open in the background while I do other stuff way too often.
That's what I assumed.
There's a reason I have so many games with over 200 hours on Steam. But that's about it for Destiny. Sorry to all Destiny fans, I don't quite get the rest of the soundtrack, but I love the cellos by Kronos Quartet on this piece. And now on to Nintendo blog ? Ranakel.
Well, okay, so for those that haven't played it, you might be surprised that the next track we're going to talk about is from Kid Icarus Uprising.
Yeah, that one kind of
Because-
surprised me too, because that's, like, from everything I've heard, it's more or less a fantasy shooter.
Yeah, basically with some Japanified Greek mythology elements.
Right.
Except, talking about games that goes places, Kid Icarus Uprising goes places. Like, you play a section and you think, okay, that's a good self-contained story, and then you realize you are at around a third of the game, and then you have a second arc, and then a third arc that's an alien invasion, and then a fourth arc that ties things up. And by the way, that music isn't even from the alien invasion arc. That's just on the first arc, in which you have the MacGuffin that has been stolen by just space pirates, which are an accepted part of the canon.
Nothing says Greek mythology like space pirates.
Exactly. Well, more precisely, they are nebula pirates that steal constellations. And they just happen to have hooked up a super powerful weapon you need to defeat the first big antagonist in the process. So
Now I'm just thinking now of Samus Aran being a champion of Artemis.
yeah, and the connection between Metroid and Kid Icarus isn't completely absurd, because there are literal Metroids in the game.
I was not made aware
Metroid
of this.
larvas. You know, there are Metroid larvas. They're not called that, but they obviously are that. And similarly, the space pirates aren't literally the space pirates from Metroid, but there are similarities in designs. And so after you've had the on-rail shooter sections when you chase and then circle around the spaceship as it soars over as a sea of stars, a very literal sea in this case, you just find a way to blast your way inside, and then this starts playing. So you circle around the ship a little, and then you enter the ship by finding a weak point and crashing through it entirely, which is how you enter the ground section of the stage by just flopping on the floor miserably as this glorious theme starts going dun, 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 dun. And it's got this very adventurous, heroic feel all throughout, which is just almost too strong for the gameplay itself, which can have a fair amount of downtime due to the nature of the occasionally complicated navigation and movement. But when the actions are up, you are along with it, because it's very good in my opinion. It's very inspiring.
Yeah, the song is pretty nice. It instantly brought to my mind images of an anime I watched ages ago called Glass Fleet. This is not a commentary on that anime soundtrack, for the record. I don't remember a single track from that anime, but the general aesthetics of that anime are basic. Basically, they're taking the visuals of the very pompous Middle Age kings from Western Europe, in particular France, but they're dropping them in a space opera, and in fact, Glass Fleet is a reference to the main character's spaceship, which looks like it's made of glass, so kind of makes you think of those delicate glasses that kings would use to drink wine and whatnot. And this track kind of gave me a similar vibe. Like I can see it taking place in space. I can see it happening among the stars and whatnot, but it's also very, very pompous, very
very
kingly.
much like you are attacking a space pirate ship. You have a music that has elements of space, but also elements of swashbuckling, because there are pirates, even if they are in space.
And you are, in fact, a creature of Greek mythology, sort of.
And a dork.
And a dork. Yeah, what little I know about Pitt seems to be kind of on the goofy side.
Very much so. I want to see this game remade in some way, shape or form, or have a sequel or something like that, once Masahiro Sakurai is freed from having to work on Smash for entire years. And if that's an occasion to keep making absolute all-star set of composers to work on this game, I'm in. This one being specifically composed by Noriyuki Iwadare.
Why do I know that name? I know that name. Why do I know that name? Noriyuki
Let's
Iwadare.
see.
Did he do Radiata stories?
He did Radiata story.
I thought that's why I heard that. That's like the one Tri-Ace game that Sakuraba had very little to do with, and I think that was why. Because that guy did it.
Wow, he did a lot of stuff.
Yeah, including even some Mega Man X7.
Oh.
and all of the Langrisser Growlancer series.
This guy has
It did seem Earth. That's unexpected.
Yeah.
Well, this guy has a...
and Grandia too.
Oh, Grandia 2 had a very good soundtrack, I remember. I don't remember anything about it because it's been like 20 years since I played it, but
Yeah.
I remember liking it.
And honestly, if you're going to have a track that inspires feelings of heroism and exploration and facing boldly with a smile on your face into the unknown, there are worse choices than the Grandia guy.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you know what other game has a mix of JRPG elements and space stuff? Rogue Galaxy.
So I heard this Kid Icarus song just before we started the episode. And I just, for some weird reason, was reminded of Relic's song, which is kind of like the final boss intro theme. Like, not the actual music, but the intro to it. Big, long cutscene introducing the final boss when you first see it, like, 2/3 the way through the game.
That would explain the ominous chanting.
Yes. And it's the only song on the soundtrack that sounds anything like this. I'm not even necessarily sure it's a good song, but it is definitely a unique one.
It certainly sets up a mood.
It's definitely mood music. I used
Oddly
to use
enough, this is another track that made me think of an anime, but this time a fantasy one, which is Record of Lodoss War, because the anime had some similar chanting stuff in some of the more ominous tracks.
I know that reference. I played a game about that earlier this year. I actually know that one.
Yeah.
I'm glad you do.
That was a really great game, by the way. Like, totally off topic, but if y'all are Metroidvania fans, check out Deedlit and Wonder Labyrinth. That's actually a really good game.
And check out Toho Luna Nights by the same dev.
I want to check that out, actually. I've been thinking about that. That's the one with the time stop made with the knives, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Also, I have the Lodoss 3-part DVD set in my shelves.
Nice!
Is it the OVA or the TV series?
I believe that's the TV series.
All I know
The TV
about
series, the one I'm thinking of.
all I know about it is apparently it's based on the creator's D&D game, which just explains so much.
Yes.
Yep.
100%.
Each
And-
new series is a new campaign.
Yep, and then the lead girl has just amazing movement tech, and I love it. Like, you get double jump in the first, like, area. It's awesome.
Yeah. Anyway, back to the episode.
Yes, please.
Back to space.
Got distracted there for a moment. I don't sing very much, but back when I did more regularly, even in private, I actually used this song as a vocal warm-up.
Oh, interesting.
I just admitted that publicly, God help me.
It's not too late to delete it from the final version.
Yeah, it is.
You are the producer, so
I could, but no, I kind of feel like talking about that.
Yeah.
I almost like this song in spite of itself, because it's a very dry song despite its unique take.
It's pretty repetitive. Like, I figured I could have heard this song in another version on a NES track back when most game soundtrack were pieces that lasted like a minute and then looped on and on.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let's just say that an ominous intro for a final boss doesn't need to be 5 minutes long.
Except for the fact that the cutscene was like 5 minutes long.
Yeah, it's a final boss.
Lord.
He's going to have to make a lot of speeches about why really you are the bad guys.
Or why you and him are not too different.
I see you've played JRPGs before.
I like the vibe of this one. You have, like, the baritone singer with the soprano kind of bouncing off of each other. Again, it's a short song that probably doesn't need to be as long as it is.
Also, it kind of feels like it's taking space opera almost too literally.
It really was. This was when the space part kind of gave away to a bit of fantasy, but then it gets the space part back at the very end, which is nice. Rogue Galaxy was like a solid 6.5 out of 10 game. It had so many things, including its soundtrack, that were almost excellent and just missed the mark.
It is the mercenaries wing of JRPGs.
It kind of is, which coming from a group like Level 5, which did some really cool stuff back in those days. This was like the last of the traditional Level 5 games, like the Dark Cloud games. Then they kind of went over to their Ni no Kuni / Inazuma 11 kind of side. I've been living there ever since. I'm sorry?
And Layton.
And Layton, yeah. Like, Level 5 is still doing some very cool stuff, just it's completely different from their classic stuff. Like, we're never going to see a Dark Cloud 3.
Oh, it will be very different indeed.
Or it will be very different indeed, which is entirely possible. But this was kind of their last, like, classic Level 5 game. And you can kind of feel it, and they just missed turning the corner on being excellent. And I'm kind
Which is probably the most level 5 thing to do, honestly.
Yeah. Speaking honestly.
I know it hurts, but...
Yeah. All of their games have all of this, like, incredible potential, and it just never quite clicks. It gets so close, but it never quite makes it. Never quite makes it over the line.
A very lovable flow chant.
Yeah. And the music kind of follows that. Like, this song, like, as we said when we talked about the Hirota episode, this soundtrack really benefited from the remix album. And if this one got the remix, if this song got the remix, we'd probably be talking about it as one of the greats if it got a proper remix.
Yeah, absolutely.
This version is pretty cool. It's got some great features to it, but it just misses the mark. Hey, look, it's level 5. What else is new?
As the sort of token dark ambient music fan of the podcast, I can definitely say I dig this track. It does not need to be 5 minutes long.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes, very much. Next.
Well, next would be... I mean, we mentioned we were on the Nintendo blog, say, for this tangent. Let's head back with Nintendo's premier space franchise.
Not Metroid,
Namely,
because we skipped it.
Yes. That is more of an exoplanet franchise. I'm talking, of course, about Super Smash Bros.
We both picked Super Smash Bros. Remixes, but that's not really what I intend to talk about.
Something tells me that playing D&D with Ranakel is dealing with a rules lawyer.
You see,
it's technically not a space franchise, it's an exoplanet franchise.
You see, this is why in my D&D campaigns I execute Rule 0, which is the DM is always right.
Look, there's a reason my favorite edition is the 4th one. I wasn't always like that, though. I remember the first game I mastered, I didn't even know the system. I mostly had a very loose understanding and improvised based on that.
So, yeah, we were going to talk about the original versions, but it turns out, like usual, Smash Brothers, the best thing about it remains its soundtrack. And
we just talked about the fact that Sakurai has nagged to assemble an all-star team of composers and arrangers, and Smash Bros. Is very true for that things, bro.
Yeah. Here we go on a tangent again. I'm still love the fact that they got Yoko Shimomura to cover herself and do a version of Vegas theme from Street Fighter 2. That was just great.
It's amazing. That cover is so good.
It's so good. In this case, we're not talking about Street Fighter, however. We're talking about Star Fox.
or more specifically about Star Wolf.
Well, you are. I'm talking about Star Fox.
No, are you?
Well, yeah, my song is the first level of the first game, which Wolf didn't exist back then.
I thought you picked the Star Wolf track. Did I pick it by accident?
You must have, because I had nothing to say about this.
Oh, so that's why we were so messy in starting this, because I thought it was your track and you thought it was my track.
It's not my track.
And I hate that mix.
I wasn't super thrilled with it either. I was okay. I didn't hate it, but like...
I prefer the original N64 version or the Assault version, but this one is too in between for me.
How the hell did we get here?
So that's a very good question.
So do we just take it as an accident and delete it from the episode order entirely? I'm okay with that.
I kind of love the fact that we're talking about this accidentally, so no, I don't think so. I think we could go ahead and say this one isn't great.
Yeah, okay. This one isn't great. As I've said, my problem with it is that it's too in between, because what I loved so much about the original appearance of Star Wolf theme in Star Fox 64/Light Wars in Europe was that it had such a high pace. It kept you in the idea of a high-intensity dogfight.
Yeah. Honestly, Star Fox as a series is very good at that.
Yeah, exactly. Except for Star Fox Zero, which is trash and one of the games I refunded the fastest. Maybe the only one I did of recent memory.
Remind me, wasn't that Platinum?
Yes, it was.
I've never seen Platinum mess up that hard, which is really saying something.
Ah, I see you haven't played the Ninja Turtles game.
I've actually heard good things about that game.
And which one was it that they... Was it the Avatar game?
I've heard good things about that one too. Anyway, go on.
Yes. Either you focus on the high-speed intensity of the dogfight, which the original did, or you do what Star Wars Assault did, with a slower version of this theme, a remix that kind of take it in a more dark hero route than a full-on antagonist route. And this one is in between to match the pace set by Sector Z, which is intermingled in this track. And the result is inoffensive.
Yeah, I was actually
really doesn't make sense for a Smash Bros. Game, because talk about games that are fast.
Yeah, I was actually very surprised that we were talking about this, which is funny because apparently so were you.
Yeah.
Because I didn't really think there was much to say about this song.
I feel so much better knowing that both of you felt very meh about it, because that was my reaction when I listened to it in the playlist.
It is just a very meh song.
I think what happened is that we discussed Star Fox. I just typed in my YouTube search a Star Wars theme and picked the first one that popped up.
That must be...
It's a damn crime that this is the first one that popped up.
Yeah.
So how's that karma about not doing anything wrong going for you?
Oh, it's doing great.
Yeah, because the actual song I picked is not meh in the least. It's actually kind of one of the most memorable space shooter themes that I can think of. And that is the very first level of the very first game, Corneria.
And not the very first level of the second game, like I thought, because I mix it up, because I am never wrong, except when I am.
Apparently. And I just remember how this one just starts, where it just, you get that little, like, you get the build-up, and then it just hits that melody line hard, and you just instantly get it. And it's just... I went with this remix because I think it really kind of makes it work, but honestly, the original FX chip version, like, what they were able to accomplish on the SNES sound hardware back in those days was actually really impressive.
The fact that it's an on-rail games also means that for this part of the episode, everything just lines up in a controlled fashion that is wonderful. Of course, that doesn't apply to the Smash Bros. Version, but the original Corneria, not only do I remember the track and can hear it the moment I hear the first note, I can also remember at same level the animal noises from your teammates communicating and going.
I didn't know you could do scat singing as well.
Oh, I can do everything. Badly.
Yeah, we need to update our idea for an album to include not just beatboxing but scat singing as well.
We'll figure it out as we go. I think... This joke is going to become real, and it's either going to be a huge hit or everyone involved is going to be disappointed. We'll find out. But yeah, this is one of those songs that just sort of instantly stuck in my head and stayed there for like 30 years. I still can picture that just opening, just leaving the docking bay and starting the fight with this song over it. Smoother Groove did a version of this song that immediately brought it back into the forefront of my mind, and I'm like, yeah, I think more people need to recognize that this song is just freaking great. And here I am in the year 2021, once again saying, this song is freaking great.
As much as I love Kid Icarus Uprising's soundtrack, as I've mentioned many times before, none of the tracks on the whale sections of this game, of which there are many, still beats this theme.
Yeah, it just sets the tone so spectacularly.
It is the rail shooter song.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you see this, you are dodging spaceships, small and big, and shooting them like that.
Yeah.
It's
avoiding buildings falling down, flying through rings to get power-ups, all that fun jazz.
It just sets up a perfect pace.
Yeah. And honestly, basically all of the original Star Fox soundtrack sounds like this. It's all very, very controlled like this. It's all very, very good like this. I think the final level is up there as well in terms of just how, like, effectively it works as music. But again, there's something just special about this opening theme that I think, once again, needs to be talked about. Which is why I was so confused. We were also talking about the Star Wolf theme, because I'm like, this doesn't have that same punch and impact, and I'm not sure why it's being talked about. Maybe I'm missing something. It turns out we were just missing communication.
Exactly. And Mary.
That was such a weird thing. I love that happened, by the way. That was one of those, like, the West Wing, I thought I was following you, but I was following you moments where everyone was just walking aimlessly. It was great.
I mean, it's a perfect case where I didn't make a mistake. We just had a happy accident.
Sure.
Didn't know we had French Bob Ross in our podcast.
Oh, God.
Now take your follow blue and follow me as we paint a little asteroid. So, namely the asteroid from Jet Force Gemini.
This was a cool track. Yeah, I saw where he was going with that, which is why I shut up. But yeah, this is a cool track.
Yeah, it's not my favorite from the game, but it is the most space-like.
I would agree there.
Because a lot of what you do is going on either planets or the inside of spaceship as either a fireproof guy, a girl that can swim, or a dog on tank treads. Which is why it is, of course, the best game of the N64.
That's a bold claim.
And completely hyperbolic.
Yeah, I was about to say. Like,
but
know many people who would disagree with that.
Yeah, but it is genuinely a very, very good game. A bit complex to take because, the controls, it is a third-person shooter on the N64, so it has issues, but the atmosphere, and for Asteroid, lack of atmosphere, I guess, are very good. And this one also has the added bonus that it is a climactic point in the game, because, like I've said, there are 3 main characters, and you play only one of them at a time, and each has their own path with their different levels, and they are all converging towards this one asteroid, where the big bad is, at which point, when the 3 of them unites and you have cleared all 3 paths, you can explore the other's level to, say, work on the sections that are on fire with the fireproof guy, which you couldn't do with the girl that can swim.
Okay.
So there is this conclusion that happens, this setup that if you are here, things are about to get final. Disregarding the fact you are about to engage in essentially 5,000 side quests.
As you do.
Right.
As you do, indeed. And yeah, as for the track more specifically, it has a very sci-fi feel, a kind of almost cheesy sci-fi with the way they go with very obvious electronic sounds and synths going boom, 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 boom. Like, it's clearly not your grandma's hard sci-fi.
Parts of the track kind of reminded me a bit of the GBA Metroid games, where they kind of went more story focused.
Mm-hmm.
And so there were some stronger melodies on some of the tracks for those games than on the previous Metroid games. It kind of has a similar vibe to me, but even more focused on the melody.
I suppose, though for this one the vibe that most stands out is maybe this track isn't as typical sci-fi techie as some of the other tracks we'll talk about later, but for these games it is pretty blatant, because the rest of the game has a lot of I'd say a militaristic but very unified feel, except for the first level, which sounds completely different for some reason.
Okay, fair.
But the boom, da, 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 kind of sounds that you hear are sounds that you hear throughout the entire soundtrack, and they're present there, of course, because it's a conclusion point. They have to make it a tie with the rest of the game. So yeah, in a way, this Asteroid track is, I'd say its main failing is that while it is this very good dark atmosphere, yet with a strong pace track, is kind of better than the generic boss theme that follows after that. So it's a case where the build-up almost overtakes what it's building up to. Like, I remember the asteroid itself, I remember the place where the boss fight happens, I don't remember the boss fight itself.
That says a lot about the game, gotta be honest.
Now then, to move on from one game to another, I believe you saw similarities between this track and another one, of which I'm inclined to agree, so let's talk about another kind of track that's at a conclusion, and talk about Faster Than Light's Last Stand.
Nice. Yeah, so I never played FTL. It's one of those games that's always been kind of in the back of my mind of, I should probably try this, and then I just never did.
As someone who has played, I'll just say this much. You would be surprised at how different this track is when you actually have all the alarms in your ship going while the track plays.
Yeah, I feel like that is an accurate statement. I probably wouldn't know what to do with that.
I didn't either.
Fair. So this is a song that actually reminded me of the last one, the Jet Force Gemini song. There's this sort of like, last week we talked a lot about arpeggiation. There's kind of like this slow arpeggiated build on both of them with a very similar kind of tone to it. They do kind of remind me of each other in that way. It's kind of almost a shorthand for spaceship stuff.
I would say, though, that I get a more descending feel from the Asteroid one when it goes boo 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 boo, while the last one goes do 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 and more upwards.
Yeah, but I mean, yes, that's accurate. One goes down the scale, one goes up. It's still the same kind of. It's still the same kind of vibe, though. It's still the same kind of. I don't want to say vibe. It's the same like. It's that conversation again, literal tone. It's just.
Yes,
used
and
differently.
It's still in space. It's just that one seems to emphasize the darkness of this flaming rock, while the other is emphasizing the less than situation and the hope it tries to carry.
Yeah, I see a lot in composition circles and honestly in game development circles of shorthands, so to speak. We've talked about like shorthand for Japanese music is always going to be, they're going to just throw that flute in there. Right? Like, this is Japan. Flute and or shamisen. Every time.
Indeed.
And this sort of arpeggiated sound, up or down, is kind of a shorthand for space. You hear it a lot. And kind of incredibly, the vast majority of the stuff we've talked about today doesn't possess that. But you see it a lot more in indie circles that probably have less music budgets than something like Halo 2's Infinite budget. Haha, Halo Infinite's coming out pretty soon. But in the indie circles, for something like FTL, yeah, you could kind of hear that, like, oh, we're making a space song, it should sound spacey. This is spacey, so we're playing it this way. It's just one of those things that I kind of latched onto.
Yeah, and it's part of why I wanted this track to be on, because as much as I absolutely love some of the unusual picks we have, I try to have some things that are very much the core of the theme. The last track we're going to talk about is one of them, certainly, and FTL was another. It's probably the most space-like space song there is on this playlist.
Yeah, I would.
Yeah, because I mean, we talked about the distinction between things that happen in space and things that happen on exoplanet. This one, FTL, is pure space all the time. Your main game screen is a top-down view of your spaceship. And there are elements where you land on planet, but they are short text adventures, nothing more. It's a space game at core, and the soundtrack reflects that. The way it happens throughout the game is that you mainly have themes that have a calm version, depending on the species that controls the sectors, like pirates, NGs, rocks, etc. And the music smoothly ramps up when suddenly you have a battle situation. But for this one, it is the final boss you get if you've managed to survive up to that point and dealt with your main objective, which is to warn the Federation about the rebel superweapon. And then you fight this superweapon head-on and probably die in 15 seconds because your shield isn't equipped to handle that.
I mean, it's a superweapon, so...
How did you see my gameplay?
Oh, trust me, I have the same experience.
It sounds like that's sort of the gameplay, is what I'm hearing.
And again, we've talked about unity of the soundtrack, and this is the case here as well, as far as this last stand is concerned. like there are definitely some leitmotif and musical short phrases and elements from the entire game that are present in this track, because that's a culmination point. Of course, the most present of all is when you are fighting the rebel ship, because this is a rebel flagship. But the fact that there are small notes from the other races, I believe, is mostly meant to represent your ship, because at this point you probably have encountered and added to your crew a few different members according to their specialties, and should have a pretty diverse crew, each according to the specialty, doing their best to keep your ship together, and probably failing.
That's kind of incredible. I can't say I got any of that vibe from this song.
Well, these parts are mostly in reference to the rest of the soundtrack. The song itself, aside from these reference elements, is mostly about, well, the fight itself and the kind of pace the game sets against this foe that kind of gigantic compared to the West in terms of firepower, in terms of number of room. I think one of the most striking elements, though, are the first notes, because I don't know what instrument was used there. It kind of reminds me of two spoons stabbed against each other. It's this very low-key, very low-tech mechanical sound, which is then followed by something much deeper, and combine the low-key kind of grey sound and then the booming, growing sounds help set up this calm followed by the storm, and the rest of the track you're in that storm.
I kind of feel also like the intro reminds me a little bit of hammers striking one another, which makes me think of just how much time you spend fixing damage to your ship in the game.
Yeah, no, the repairs.
Yeah, I can hear that. All right.
Now, that's pretty much what I had to say about this track. Overall, very unified OST, as I've said. Yet that takes great effort to give each of the species in it its identity and represent it musically. It's an indie staple for a reason.
Yeah.
Now then, let us talk about X.
Not to be confused with Mega Man X, as everyone tends to confuse the two. So the X franchise of space simulators, which I guess you could say I'm a fan, though I've only played 2 of them and only enjoyed 1, but oops. As far as I can tell, the entire franchise has had the same composer throughout. And I actually looked up the pronunciation this time. It's Alexei Zakharov. And he's pretty good at doing what people call space music, I would say. The entire soundtrack tends to be space music, as in the music genre called space music. And there are 2 pieces that I like to bring up, which tend to be my favorites. Starting with the game that I've played and enjoyed, which is X4.
I was gonna ask which one of the 2 was the one you enjoyed. Thanks for clearing that up.
So I take
Yeah,
it there's some rivalry between 3 and 4 in terms of like who enjoys what more. It's one of those series.
Not that I know of.
Actually, my mistake. Sorry, X3 is the one I enjoy.
Oh.
It's one of those franchises where they kind of gave up on giving sequential titles eventually. So starting with the one that I actually enjoy, which is X3. To be precise, it's the Albion Prelude expansion. It's a long story. The game has a lot of self-contained expansion packs. Anyway, the track in question, titled Yet to Be Discovered, it plays in a specific sector of space with the rather evocative name of Home of Light. And it's a very serene and sort of new agey song, I'd say.
Yeah, like that sounds like a track that would play on a place named the Home of Light.
Yeah, pretty much.
Actually,
Yeah.
the thing that I'm thinking of is kind of in Guardians of the Galaxy 2. The place where everybody is painted golden and very kind of cult-like. That's the kind of track that could play there.
Yeah, in X3, you don't actually get to walk on the planets and space stations. You're always controlling your ship or using menus. But
Which is very space.
very much. But if I recall correctly, the Home of Light is basically the biggest space station in the game because that's the homeland, so to speak, of an entire species, and they don't live on a planet, they live on this space station, and it reflects a golden light of a nearby sun.
Ooh.
So it kind of fits that imagery you mentioned of all the golden colors and whatnot. And I find it to be a very relaxing piece. The end is weirdly loud for some reason when it does a transition to cut the song at the end. But other than that, it's really peaceful, really calming, and it's in a playlist I have on Spotify called Sleeping Pills, because I listen to those when I'm trying to sleep.
Understandable.
Even in spite of the loud ending to this track.
I like when you can get away with stuff like that. Sorry, quick question. So you said it made it sound like in X3 you couldn't step foot on stations and stuff, but on X4 you can?
I'm not sure about X4 in particular. The game that followed X3 was called X... give me a second. The game that
Naming
followed
scheme.
Yeah. The game that followed X3 was actually called X Rebirth. Because they were trying to do something new with the franchise and whatnot. To those who aren't familiar with the X franchise, it's a very open-ended franchise of space simulators. You can be a space pirate, you can play the stock market, you can build your own space stations, you can be part of a military.
The way it's been described to me is that it's a space game where you start with one ship, and from there you can command an entire armada. Or,
Pretty much. And
or things that are, or anything in between, pretty much.
Yeah, and X Rebirth was a bit more story focused, and while you could add other ships to your flotilla, so to speak, you couldn't swap your main ship. But in contrast, you could actually see the planet's surface there. On X3, you navigate to the planet, but you interact through menus and through space stations and stuff like that. On X4, I do not know, I haven't played it yet. When I mentioned there's an X game I've played that I don't like, that was X Rebirth. But since we're talking X4, the other track that I always like to bring up is from X4, despite me not playing it. Which
And the two tracks couldn't be more different.
pretty much, since the next track is actually, from what I can gather, a fight theme called Lances of Light, which, if you ask me, is a rather poetic way of talking about lasers.
Okay.
You took the words right out of my mouth.
And yeah, it's
But
a
yeah,
very-
that's
it's
a space
mu-
duck fighting music run through.
Yeah, it's a much more fast-paced. In my opinion, it still keeps a bit of that ethereal sound that Alexei Zakharov does a lot, but it's much more fast-paced, much more impactful, and to be honest, I use it a lot as background music when I'm working, because the fast pace without lyrics to distract me really does help. But it's also a great track that I love to listen to on its own. I really love the dynamic in it. And the effects of sort of echoes in the background kind of add to that ethereal, spacey vibe, if you ask me.
Yeah, the song, I haven't played X4 either, but I hear that and I'm thrown back to when that brief period where I had access to Flight Stick and played, I believe it was Freelancer 2 or Free Space, one of those. And just,
Freelancer 2 is super underrated.
yes.
I haven't played the sequel.
And just dogfighted. And it's just a unique experience where we don't have a lot of these days.
I think
Though I do
nowadays it's kind of
wonder-
limited to stuff in early access or stuff in the Star Wars franchise.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I do wonder how the Star Wars squadrons feel. But I haven't really looked it up.
I've heard it's a good game. I have no idea how it plays compared to these other games.
Yeah,
in
exactly,
combat.
because it can be a good game while also being completely different from early 2000s space shooter.
Besides, we are talking about a very fiction-y thing, which is dogfights in space with lasers and missiles. So there can be some very different interpretations of what that would play like.
Yeah.
But yeah, in general, I honestly recommend the entire soundtrack to basically every game in the X franchise. Those are just my personal favorites for vastly different reasons between the two of them.
Yep. And in general, you like your East European composers.
I have noticed that.
And I like my ethereal music as well.
Indeed.
Like I said before, I am the sorta token dark ambient guy.
Yes. Which is exactly why you then brought up a Star Wars track.
Yes, very dark ambient, especially dark. Yeah, the next track is from Star Wars The Old Republic, not to be confused with Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic.
The remake
other
of
words,
which got announced either
announced.
the day of or the day before this recording.
The day before.
The
Day before. I only saw the news for it today, but yes,
Yeah, no, that was at the PlayStation Experience, I believe.
I think so.
It was a short trailer showing Revan and a new logo, which fits a lot with the new Star Wars canon, so people are wondering if they will change the story to fit the canon as well. But that's a whole
Also,
another can of worms.
That is a
Also,
whole other
the
can of
first
worms.
game was basically on D&D 3.5, so things loop in mysterious ways.
Oh yes, yes they
So
do.
I'm going to let you guys talk about this song, and then I'm going to comment with my nuclear hot take. So I'll keep my trap shut until then.
Oh boy. In any case, the track in question is titled "The End in the Stars," and I kind of got into this game late, into the Old Republic late. And from what I understand, this is the title screen / logging screen / character selection screen theme from the Onslaught expansion onwards, and they had a different theme beforehand.
Interesting.
It's composed by Jesse Harlin, and it kind of feels to me very similar to some of the stuff that played in the prequels movies, like the Duel of the Fates, iconic from Phantom Menace.
Of course.
Because of all the choir in the back adding a lot of texture to it. So it kind of reminds me a lot of some of the stuff in the prequels soundtracks.
Yeah, which is funny because the sound of the prequels is very different from the song of the 4, 5, 6 episode.
I disagree that this sounds like either of them. Sorry, I'm keeping my take in. Keep talking.
Nobody should, for that matter.
Yeah,
because it's the Old Republic. It's not the prequels era, and it's not the first series era.
It's set, I think, 2,000 years before Episode 1 or something?
Something like that.
But it has... it does have its own identity. I'm not saying it would completely fit right into the prequels, but I see a lot of themes being... not necessarily themes being repeated, but ideas being brought to this. It's no John Williams track, I will say that much, but I like it as a first impression of the game. Like, you boot it up and there's this huge choir singing to you, which sounds massive.
Riding. Oh, no, sorry, wrong game. But it's kind of the same feel of being welcomed by a choir like that, and that's my point of comparison, my main one this time. It's I didn't know it was a main menu music, but I thought, listening to it, that it could only fit a main menu or a very specific cutscene. And apparently that's the former.
Your instincts were right on that one.
Now, the one thing I do wonder is how we mentioned sound similarities between this and that series. I would have loved to refresh in my mind, now that I think of it, the Knights of the Old Republic soundtrack, because if there are points of comparisons to be made, it should be with this one. The problem being that I don't remember any single Knights of the Old Republic soundtrack.
Mostly because a lot of it is repurposed or remixed Williams music.
Makes sense.
Which is exactly my problem with this song. I hate this song. I hate it. I despise it. And I hate it and I despise it for the exact same reason I hate and despise the Lord of Shadow soundtrack. I'm sure it's competent. I'm sure it sounds great. It doesn't sound like Star Wars. At all. You are dealing with something with a very, very unique musical identity. A very, very imitatable music identity. And it goes in a completely different direction. And it sounds wrong to me. It sounds incorrect.
You've won the argument the moment you made the comparison with Lords of Shadow to me. I have nothing to add to the conversation anymore.
Yeah. I'm sure it's very competent. I'm sure I'm sure if it was on anything that wasn't a Star Wars game, I'd be speaking very highly of this. But because it's a Star Wars game, and because Star Wars is so just intrinsically associated with John Williams' incredible score, and you can't call it anything other than incredible. Let's be honest here. Even the prequels.
Yes.
It doesn't sound like Star Wars to me at all. And I'm just like, this isn't right.
So do you think that track would have gone by you better if it was more distinct than the John Williams track? And if it really tried to do its own thing?
I don't know. That's a hard one for me to answer. I don't mind things going in a new direction, but this isn't so much...
It is a what if.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I fully admit that I hate this for basically the wrong reasons, but it's outside of its identity, and I just can't. I can't judge it on its own merits. I can't. I wish I could.
Yeah, because the problem I see is that the pace of a lot of Star Wars tracks absolutely would not fit an MMORPG.
I agree with that statement as well.
Yeah, the point about it being an MMO and an MMO having a very different vibe to it might be why I'm more forgiving of this, because I have a similar issue to the one Galen had when I hear the theme to the original Knights of the Old Republic game, to be honest. That one sounds very much like it's trying but failing at being a Star Wars piece.
I don't disagree with that. As I said, it's very we're all calling it Williams-esque, and it doesn't quite hit the mark. But at least it's trying to hit the mark, and I think that's where I'm like,
The Kotor track being composed by Jeremy Soule, by the way.
Well, hopefully the remaster hires someone different this time around.
I think it probably will, because Jeremy Soule has lost a lot of goodwill in the industry in recent years.
Yeah, that's kind of why I mentioned that. We'll avoid covering this topic again, I think, because that's just getting depressing.
That it is. In any case, I think we've spoken enough about John Williams wannabes for now.
I mean, I think calling them wannabes is definitely a bit harsh, because what do you even put on the order? What kind of track do you even make if you're not John Williams for these games? Because that's a problem I think with the Star Wars license here, is that it's Star Wars, it's not space. It has a unique sound that's distinct from space and is just Star Wars.
Yeah, that's fair. I think that's part of the reason why most Star Wars games just stick to using bits of the actual soundtracks to the actual movies.
Yeah, it exists in its own bubble.
And I think it's also worth pointing out that while most Star Wars games do that and they can get away with that, an MMO not only has that issue of pacing, as you mentioned earlier, but an MMO also constantly gets more expansions and new places to explore, new quests and areas, and you need new
can
music
only
for that.
listen to the same 17 tracks for so long.
Exactly, you need new music, and John Williams is pretty much retired. I think he only does stuff occasionally, and I don't think he does games. So
no, he doesn't.
What are you gonna do?
I never said hire the guy himself. Though, admittedly, part of my frustration, I don't think frustration is the right word, part of my loyalty to the musical identity, I saw John Williams conduct live at the Hollywood Bowl. So,
I get your point, too.
Yeah.
I don't mean that as an attack against your point. I kind of agree with it. I just, for some reason, with this game versus the first two Knights of the Old Republic games, for some reason, with the MMO, I am more forgiving, I guess. Hard to tell why.
Yeah.
But I enjoyed the soundtrack more than I did the KOTOR ones.
Yeah, like the thing with this whole situation is that it is a tall order.
Yeah. Yeah.
It is.
Actually, now that I think of it, yes, there is one Star Wars thing that isn't a video game, but that has a soundtrack that is both completely different by a different composer, and that manages to stand on its own, and that is The Mandalorian.
I haven't seen that.
That is fair. That is
The
fair.
Mandalorian has its own sound, and it's great.
I'll say one thing before I give my opinion. Galen, this is where the bleep goes in the edit.
Got it.
The theme they used for when Boba Fett is fighting is fucking awesome. Has some very alien sounds, very extraterrestrial stuff, and it fits his savage, brutal, physical fighting style from when he doesn't have the armor yet, and it's amazing.
Yeah, and overall they have this... In a way, if Star Wars is fantasy with a space coat of paint, The Mandalorian is Western with a space coat of paint. And the soundtrack reflects that. And maybe that's because of this genre translation that they managed to have a sound that is different but stands on its own toe-to-toe with this of the John Williams originals.
Fair enough. I look forward to checking that out at some point.
So, since we are talking about music with sort of extraterrestrial vibes, even if it's from The Mandalorian, why don't we talk about a game that is set in an extraterrestrial planet? Question mark. Ranakel, please explain.
I will in fact not talk about Risk of Rain.
Oh.
Because somebody already did that, and that happens to be Chris Christodoulou, the author of the track, which has on his YouTube channel the whole OST uploaded, and then the album with a commentary track. And even though it is definitely Risk of Rain, a game that I would qualify as an exoplanet game way over a space game, since I found that out during my research, I just had to mention it because the entire soundtrack commented by the composer is something that is absolutely great, and I wanted to promote that.
That is really cool, because that's a really good soundtrack.
Yeah, and not only that, it's very fun to listen to him, kind of tear it to pieces and mention specific tracks. He does the humming thing too, by the way. It's not just me. And not only there is the commentary track, if you want to really get in the guts of things, there also is on his Bandcamp what he calls the game soundtrack Engineer Edition, in which there are separate tracks for each of the different sub-tracks in each part of the album. Each synth recorded individually, each guitar recorded individually, to just tinker with it. And so yeah, I just thought I'd mention that, because again, if we can get composers to do our work for us, it's great. Also, the Risk of Rain soundtracks are very good, independently of the fact that they are more exoplanet and alien than space in nature. What is very space in nature, and perhaps one of the most space-like also in this episode's tracklist, is the main theme from Galactic Civilizations 2.
Okay.
Now that one is probably the one that's closest to another big space license, which is Star Trek. This one has some Star Trek sonorities as far as I'm concerned, in the way the choir work and in the way the first notes of the music hit as well. It has this very composed and grand at the same time tone that a 4X space game should have.
Yeah, I think the horns reminded me a bit of some Star Wars tracks. when John Williams
Somewhat now?
Star Wars. You heard it right.
Oh, I understood Star Wars tracks. And I was like, what? But no, you meant tracks. Yes, that
Tracks
makes
with
way
an
more...
A.
That makes much more sense.
Correct.
Yes. Continue. Sorry, my bad.
Yeah, in that, sometimes John Williams just wanted to show some grandiose feeling through the music, and he would usually do that through horns, especially in the prequels, but also a bit in the original trilogy. And
Horns in the Star Wars soundtracks? Never.
absolutely never. No choirs either. But yeah,
I mean, that's more of a prequel thing.
yeah, the horns reminded me a little bit of like when they're showcasing Coruscant in the prequels or something.
Yeah,
But then
I can see that. The specific shots, like at the beginning of each movie, where you are just watching the main character's ship entering a planet's atmosphere.
Yeah, something along those lines. But then there's the more operatic singing, and that is 100% track.
Yeah.
This time with an E.
In a way, if the start is you looking at the planet, the moment the voice starts rising, so in a way, if the first notes are you looking at the planet from space, the moment the voice rises up is like if the camera, instead of following the ship that entered the atmosphere, turned around and looked at more space. Because as it turns out, there's a lot of space in space.
Shocking.
Yeah. But yeah, this one just has this... It's the right kind of sound for a space management game. Even though...
I cannot disagree with that. It's very very precise, let's say, in its use.
Yeah. Which I think is as good an occasion as any to identify, as a bit of a lead up to the conclusion maybe, what makes the space sounds what they are. Like, I think one of the most persistent thing is a length, in a way, more than a specific instrument. Like, yes, there are a lot of horns, but there are a lot of horns in a lot of other genres. But here there are very prolonged notes, there are some scenes that also stay a while, and these sounds that form a long kind of almost marine kind of bass line provide along with some more technological sonorities, mostly in things like the Asteroid track from Jet Force Gemini, kind of a core of what space can be. Musically, that is. It's kind of why one of the tracks that I considered but ultimately voted against putting in is probably from the most space-like games of all, which is Homeworld, which has a very good soundtrack for a game that happens in a desert.
All right.
But it's almost... I mean, it manages this way to make its own identity, but kind of musically loses some of the core space sound, which this track embodies nicely.
And with that, I think that is about all the time we have on this very twisted and weird episode. I'd like to apologize again, just because of my level of involvement. I hope I was able to help keep things entertaining for y'all. Rana really carried the weight on this one, so let's give him a big round of applause. Thank you so much.
Would you say I made it so?
Nice. Yes. Yes, I would. And with that, we'll be back next time as we hit hyperdrive on the way to more music talk. That was a terrible joke, but it was the best one I could come up with, and I apologize. Y'all are wonderful. We'll see you guys next time for more music.